free agents available for the Jags. We're going to pass it over to the professor now to go over a list of guys that he took a look into based on availability, what the Jags need, and then on top of that, can they afford it? Coach?
Yeah, so, I did a little digging. That's what I do. I am the professor, okay? And so, Jags got $14 million. And so what do? I go on PFF. And I will tell you this, I didn't realize PFF was a paid subscription site. So what I did is I went ahead and put the email in to Katie at HR. She sent the request over to Holly in accounting, and then he's going to send it over to Shelton in purchasing that's got the black card. And we're going to see if we can get the PFF Plus so I don't have to go, to 25 different sites just to get the essentially the stuff I want to get. So we'll see if that goes through. I'm working on it, but I think you're looking at an edge. So Frank Clark, he kind of fits that mold of a nose/edge. He can play both ways. Clowney, and then Yannick Ngakwe. Now, out of the three, they like Clowney the best. PFF does with a 75.8 overall score. He did play 12 games this year, 29 pressures, but only had 2 sacks. Frank Clark, I really think he's going to be out of the price range. Now, the Jags only have $14 million. I think you go get Yannick Ngakwe. He had 12 sacks last year, 27 pressures. I think you go get him. He's a known commodity. You tell him, hey, 8.5 million guaranteed, and if we make the playoffs and you play, all 15 games or a certain number of snaps, then we'll spice it up a little bit. The 14 million is flexible, but you don't want to spend it all just in case you have a safety or a corner go down and get hurt. You don't want to spend it all because you're going to need a little of that cushion money. And then truthfully, it's just, it seems to me just the plug and play guy in Ngakwe.
Yeah, no, look, first of all, I'll be sure to check my email from HR. But yeah, I think Ngakwe, he's definitely going to be the best option. I have a few guys that are close with the organization. There's been a lot of noise on trying to sign him. There's been a few numbers tossed around between the $6 and $7 million range. You just mentioned the $8.5 to $9 million with maybe some incentives, fully guaranteed. To lock him in, I think he's looking for a little bit more from what's being spoke about. But like you said, that plug and play where you're not having to come in. And I think where the Jaguars are right now, especially with what happened with Urban just a few years ago, the chemistry wasn't there. You definitely had a culture issue. Jaguars have had a culture issue, it feels like, for a while, and it's the first time that the culture issue, not the first time, but the first time in a couple of years that the culture issue seems to be on track, that everybody's on the same page, everyone's bought in, there's just a nice, healthy brotherhood that's happening. Calvin Ridley's coming in, transitioning very smoothly, obviously having his letter to the NFL, his apology, maturing over that year, dealing with the things that he had to deal with. You've got, obviously, T-Law writing a letter to Duval. The energy behind this right now is the greatest that it's ever been. So you've got to be very careful on who you plop into that, that science project, that chemistry buildup that you have. You can't just plug and chug anybody, because it could, no matter how great that player is, could cause a disruptance in the locker room. So obviously, Calais Campbell was a top-end option. He ended up going with the Falcons. At the time, seemed like a pretty crazy sign because I think a lot of people thought, no way he just goes. If he goes to the Falcons, it's got to be a money grab because how do you go there with only a few years left? But Falcons kind of put together something pretty nicely with the draft with Drake London, Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. So maybe the Falcons aren't as dead as we think they are, especially in a division that is nowhere near looking to do any damage. They got the Saints, who we're going to talk about, have considerably the most easiest schedule. They've got, who do they got? Who's their quarterback now from Vegas? What's his name? Derek Carr. So they're probably going to be the favorites to win that division with the Panthers and Anthony Richardson being new. Who else is in that division? Oh, the Vikings. No, the Vikings are not in that division. Who's in that division? Saints, Falcons,
Panthers,
Lions? No.
And Atlanta.
I already said Atlanta. Who's the fourth team? Drawing a blank.
Yeah, me
Buccaneers.
too.
Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay.
who was also in shambles. So maybe kind of like digress here, but maybe he made a little bit of a smart move by going there because that division is pretty wide open, in my opinion. So obviously the Jags too, it feels like it should be their division to lose at this point, especially when you have three of the 4 teams that could potentially have 3 rookie quarterbacks starting at some point in the season. Bryce Young's definitely going to be the guy. Anthony, more than likely by week 2, will be the guy. Will Levis and Tannehill, sounds like Malik's going to be out of a job there. So Will Levis could take over halfway through. So it's definitely the Jags to lose. So you don't want to mess that up. But I don't think you're adding players to win that division. You're adding players to beat the Chiefs, the Bengals, right? Those are the guys that you're trying to beat. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, Ngakoue obviously is the top pick for me. Muddy in the comments says Frank Clark should be the number 1 guy. Guy just shows up in the playoffs and doesn't only provide sacks, but he also forces turnovers. What's your thoughts on that, Cody?
I get that, guys, but you got to understand this is a salary cap league, and you got $14 million. What you would have to do with Frank Clark is you would essentially have to sign him to a multiple-year deal and load the money in the back end. So you sign him for like 3 years. You give him he's going to want $15 million a year. So you're looking, that's a lot of money. That's $45 million. You'd have to backload it towards the rear. And do you really want to do that? I don't think so. Not when you can go get Ngakoue. I get Frank Clark was a wrecking ball, but Ngakoue had as many pressures and he had 7 more sacks than what Frank Clark had.
All around 29 years old, so all about the same age. But I think, look, make a good point. I think Muddy also makes a good point too with having Super Bowl experience and being in that big game. Definitely a big factor there. And the Jags are in a weird scenario with the cap space. They've got a lot of guys in the coming years that are going to be looking for money. T-Law being one of them. Josh Allen being one of them. Evan Ingram right now is in a weird situation. They got the franchise tag on him currently. I think the kid that just drafted out of Penn State, that new tight end, I definitely going to think they're going to take that into consideration on what they do with him. They're obviously still paying Kirk a lot of money. Calvin Ridley just came over. Zay Jones got a lot of money tied up, which is good. It's not a bad thing. But they've got to pay a lot of people in the next few years. So